Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about are different types of wire. What I have here is 14 gauge solid core wire. You'll notice that it has a solid metal piece on the inside with plastic insulation around the outside. And on this side, I have the same gauge of wire. It's also 14. But each individual strand is actually smaller than the whole. So this is stranded wire. You can see the different types. And it actually comes as two different colors in this particular case. What I'm going to show you is using my wire cutters. I'm going to show you how to cut and strip these wires. So I'm going to take a piece of this speaker wire and cut it off. And then using my wire strippers, I'm going to strip the ends off so that you can see the different strands inside the speaker wire. There we go. And you'll notice that we keep them separate, even though they're actually glued or molded together. One side is positive with the white line on one side, and one side is negative. And we're able to wire our speakers in our house and in our car using this type of wire. Okay. Let's keep going and talk a little bit about solder. Now, solder comes in several different varieties. First, we're going to talk about the leaded mounts in each one. This particular type of solder is 100% lead, meaning that there's no flux in it whatsoever, and once you apply it, it usually has a very low melting rate, and it's also toxic, so you have to be careful with it. It's pretty rare these days, but we do have it. This is what is known as 60-40. It actually has 40% lead and 60% flux with it. And what that allows us to do, it allows us to keep things cleaner. But it has a higher melting point, so it takes a little more heat to melt it. This particular spool is a thinner strand, and then over here I have a thicker strand of 60-40. Both have their purposes. When you're dealing with bigger components, it's nice to have a big, thick piece of solder. And when you're dealing with smaller components or pieces of wire, you want to have some very thin solder. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the tools. Obviously, the very first thing is our soldering iron. Our soldering iron comes with the soldering iron stand, and the tip here at the end is heated off of the core from the center. So all the heat in this soldering iron emanates from this point down, but you don't ever want to touch any of this. Remember that it's about 400 degrees. The handle stays relatively cool, and the cord itself you don't want to get into contact with, otherwise it will melt. You want to keep your soldering iron in the soldering iron stand as long as it's on. The good news is ours is not right now. Next we have the helping hands that are there to hold the different components for when you need an extra hand. In this case, in a moment, we're going to be soldering different kinds of wire, and so we're going to stop.